Welcome to the Story Selling Podcast, the show that explores the art and science of authentic marketing for purpose-led entrepreneurs. With me, your host and founder of the Story Selling Lab, Rob Drummond. Of all the paid advertising questions I've been asked over the years, the most common one, sometimes this question is spoken out loud, sometimes it's left unsaid. The most common one is, does it work? And what people mean by that when they ask it is, does it work for me as the advertiser? Because actually any individual ad auction will always work for the ad network. Google and LinkedIn and Facebook usually will fairly happily spend your budget. That's not really in doubt. So the paid advertising options always work for the ad network. The question is does it also work for you as the advertiser? And ultimately, does it work for the person seeing the ad? Are the ads providing people with what they need? Are they adding value to people? Are they providing them with insights that they need to help them solve the problems that they are facing? Because if they are, then everyone wins. And that's what we're really aiming for here, is this kind of triangle where all three parties in any individual ad auction, stand to gain. So to answer the question of, does this work for you as an advertiser, we need to address how much should you be spending and how should you be bidding? That's one of the components. There are obviously other components that we'll cover in other episodes, what to say in your ads, what offers to make, and so on. But the first thing is if you're going to run ads, how much should you spend? Especially because if you're a new advertiser, it is going to take you a bit of time to twist the Rubik's Cube and find the combination that works for you and your business. It's quite rare that, as a new advertiser, you'll set up a campaign or a set of campaigns and hit the ball out of the park on the first swing of the bat. It can happen. It's nice when it does happen. It makes you feel good about yourself, but don't expect it to happen. There's going to be this learning phase. So here's the question: is how much should you be spending? And I can't tell you that in black and white terms. What I'm going to do on this episode is try to illustrate my thinking of how to set budgets appropriately and how to structure your account. Because what I realized in planning this episode was that you can't divorce questions of how much you spend from how you structure your accounts. So on that note, let's jump into that thread. In the good old days of pay-per-click advertising, all or most of the ad networks use manual bidding, where you would set a manual bid so that when somebody searches for a particular term or to advertise to someone on social media who has certain interests, you would set usually a per click bid. And you can still do this, and we'll cover this later in the episode. You can still set manual bids, and often there are quite good reasons why you might consider doing that. But in the old days of ads, what we would do, especially in a Google account, is you'd have a very granular account structure. Lots of different campaigns, lots of different what are called ad groups within those campaigns. Quite a complicated structure. And because you'd end up with lots of campaigns, if you've got, say, an overall budget for your accounts, that budget might get spread quite thinly across your campaigns, or you might allocate it differently to different campaigns that are more important to you, some of the ones that might seem to be performing best. I think those days are largely gone. Most of the ad networks now operate on the basis of automatic bidding, or are moving that way. It's probably foreseeable that, at least on some of the ad networks, manual bidding may be phased out at some point. I wouldn't bet against it. That is the direction, especially with all of the developments in AI. Bidding is the thing that they can automate the most easily. They're having trouble automating writing your ads, and doing the content side of it is harder. But actually, an ad network should always be able to manage bids better than you can because in real time, they have access to more data points about the person seeing that ad. They know what device they're on. They know what location they're in. They might know that, based on certain real-time signals, that somebody based in London seeing the ad at 6 a.m. perhaps is more likely to convert than somebody in Liverpool seeing the ad at 3 p.m. So they can adjust the bids in real time, in theory. That's the big idea behind automatic bidding. The downside behind automatic bidding is that you lose control over your bids. You just tell the ad network what performance target you want them to hit, and you kind of leave them to get on with it, basically. But because all of the ad networks are moving towards automatic bidding, it's certainly the default setting. Even so, on LinkedIn, if you go and create a campaign, and if you maybe don't know what settings to look at, they've actually done quite a good job of hiding the manual bidding settings. You have to know where to look to go and switch the campaign back to manual bidding. And obviously, from the perspective of the ad network, they don't really want you using manual bidding. They want to be controlling the bids. And obviously, one of the reasons for that is, yes, it can work better because they can manage the bids in the auction in real time based on more data signals. But for many small advertisers, it can be like drinking from a fire hose, and it just spends more money because the ad network will raise bids higher than you ever would manually. So I started this section of the episode talking about campaign structure. In many of the accounts that I work on, we're moving to a more simplified campaign structure with fewer campaigns. And you really want to put some thoughts up front into what campaigns you're going to need, because even if you start off on manual bidding, where you're bidding, for every time someone clicks on the ad, let's say, or for every 1,000 times the ad is delivered, even if you start off on manual bidding, it's reasonably likely at some point that you're going to switch high-performing campaigns over to automatic bidding and let the ad network determine where to set bids. At some point, there's a benefit to doing that. So you want to structure your account with that in mind. And it makes a lot of sense to try to consolidate your campaigns so that, because automatic bidding is looking at all of these data signals and you're telling the ad network to generate, let's say, conversions or signups at a certain cost per signup, the more data you have in a single campaign, the better the algorithm gets at identifying who those people are that convert and what the real-time auction signals are that indicate that somebody is more likely to convert. So there is a benefit to having fewer campaigns and having more data in those campaigns. Or if you've got a Google account, for instance, having fewer campaigns and fewer ad groups. In the old days, we might have had separate ad groups for different keyword match types. You might have had an exact match ad group and a phrase match ad group, maybe a broad match ad group. There isn't really any benefit of doing that now because there's more benefit because of the automatic bidding. There is more benefit in combining keywords or ad groups that have a similar intent. You always want to be advertising to people at the same level in the marketing funnel. But for people with a similar intent, you want to consolidate into as few campaigns as possible. It also makes your budgeting a lot easier because there is a difference between what you budget or what you set as your budgets, your campaign budgets, and what they actually spend. What I found in my LinkedIn ads campaigns is that LinkedIn will generally, particularly at smaller budgets, it's maybe not always true at larger budgets. But if you're a small advertiser and you want to kind of just dip your toe in, it's a reasonably safe assumption that LinkedIn will spend your daily budget. And you can set budgets two ways. You can set kind of lifetime budgets for the campaign, where you say, I want to spend £500 on this campaign or £1,000 or whatever the test budget is, and I want to do it over 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's one way of doing it. I'm usually setting daily budgets. So I'm saying, instead of saying, spend £1,000 over a month, I'm saying, spend £30 a day. For reasons of control of what the ad network is going to spend per day and trying to make sure that they spend it approximately evenly, It's quite rare that I'll ever use a lifetime budget at the moment. Most of my campaigns operate on daily budgets, with the idea that if you've got a simplified campaign structure, you've got fewer campaigns, you might still want to adjust the spend on a daily basis or move spend between campaigns. But it becomes a lot easier to manage with a simplified campaign structure where each campaign has a daily budget. But it's worth considering that whatever the daily budget is that you set isn't necessarily going to be what you spend. Obviously, if all of your campaigns are hitting their budgets every day, then you are going to spend all of your budget over the month. If you're spending all of your budget over the month, often that means that you're bidding too aggressively. It might be that you're using automatic bidding when actually you could be using manual bidding, lowering the per click bids that are being placed, and try to spread your budget over more time. Sometimes on LinkedIn, what I found is that if we're, for instance, using the messaging format ad campaign, so if we're using conversation ads, in the UK, currently the minimum you can bid per message send is 20 pence. And even when you bid 20 pence per message send, if you've got a smallish campaign budget, LinkedIn will still spend that within the first few hours of the day. So, in some respects, how much you can expect to spend does depend on your overall budgets. I would argue that if you're on any individual network, if you're spending, under say £1,000 or £2,000 a month, or $2,000 to $3,000, and you're advertising on a national level, so you're not just advertising to a local area. If you're advertising at national level, it's probably a reasonable assumption that the ad network will spend your budget. So then what you want to do during the test phase of the account is you normally want to be using manual bidding to keep control of your bid prices in order to try and maximize the number of clicks that you get by spending less per click. In this testing phase, what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out where can you generate conversions. Once you've figured out where to generate conversions, you can start to push more of your resources towards those campaigns, and then ultimately look at moving those campaigns to automatic bidding on the basis that the ad network should be better at managing those bids in real time once you've got more conversion data there. Google in particular will tell you that they can manage your bids on automatic bidding without any conversion data in the account. And I, for one, am skeptical about this. I think that once you're generating a few conversions a day, that starts to give them more data points. That begins to become more of a use case. Once you're generating, say, 10 or more conversions a day in any single campaign, then that campaign really probably should be on automatic bidding. It's very likely that the ad network will do a better job than you of managing those bids in real time. Once you're on automatic bidding and you've kind of opened the throttle a bit, your job then is to make sure that the conversions that you're generating, so the leads that you're generating, you need to make sure that those leads are the right type of leads that you're looking for. Because going back to the beginning of the episode, in answering, does paid advertising work for you as the advertiser? It's like, well, yes, it does, but you've got to keep your eye on the ball. You've got to make sure, first of all, that you can generate, leads in the first instance. In the second instance, you've then got to make sure that those leads are the right people and that they stay subscribed, they're interested in what you do, they have the problem that you solve, they have the money to solve it, and they're interested in having a sales conversation ultimately within a reasonable time frame. Maybe that sales conversation doesn't happen straight away. Maybe you need an email marketing nurture sequence. It's most likely that you'll need some kind of follow-up sequence, commonly email marketing, in order to build a relationship with that person after they've entered your world. But you need to be keeping tabs on, are they the right people? Because that's going to help you answer the question of, does paid advertising work for you? I kind of believe that paid advertising can work for the majority of businesses, but you have to keep your eye on the ball. On part 2 of this episode, we'll go and take a look at the different stages of your account and how you might set budgets differently at different, based on whether you're starting out or based on whether you're looking to kind of scale things up. So we'll cover that in in part 2 of Biddings and Budgets. Hope to speak to you then. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Story Selling Podcast, you'll want to make sure you're on my email list. Head to storyselling.biz/podcast, where you can opt in to future episode notifications and also download my Lead Incubator Blueprint. You can also find my book, Simple Story Selling, on Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.